A decade ago, my wife abandoned me and our 5 children, leaving our lives in chaos. Suddenly, I was faced with the daunting task of raising 5 children on my own. Despite tears and doubts, I persevered, and with each passing year I strengthened our bonds and our resilience. But nothing could have prepared me for what would happen 10 years later. When he found out what he had done, his reaction was one of amazement. The alarm clock rang at 5 in the morning and I turned it off. I got out of bed and tiptoed into the kitchen. Quiet mornings were my sanctuary, a brief moment of peace before the chaos of the day began. While making pancakes, I couldn't help but reflect on my chaotic but fulfilling life. Raising 5 children alone was never part of the plan, but it became my reality. Every smile at the breakfast table made the sleepless nights worth it. Their laughter filled our house, in stark contrast to the silence that followed their mother's departure. It had been a tough trip, but I wouldn't change it for anything. "Dad, I can't find my homework," my youngest son shouted from the hallway. With a slight giggle, I handed a forgotten lunchbox to another child. "All right, everyone moving," I ordered, organizing the chaos of the morning. They tied their shoes, zipped their jackets, and hurriedly adjusted the straps of their backpacks. Moments later, we were piling into the minivan, and I was juggling a mix of breakfast dishes and last-minute school forms. The mornings were a whirlwind, but I appreciated them. When I left the kids at home, I headed to my job at the local construction company. The hum of machinery greeted me as I entered the construction site, my steel-toed boots crunching the gravel under my feet. I greeted Jim, my supervisor, and began getting ready for the day. Despite the physical wear and tear, I found solace here, where my mind could wander from the worries of home, if only briefly. My teammates often admired my stamina. "I don't know how you do it," Pete said during a lunch break. "5 children and you keep showing up here with a smile." I shrugged, a modest smile on my face. They didn't know half of what I was doing. Late-night homework, parent-teacher meetings, juggling dinner, and bedtime. But I kept going, motivated by love for my children and their future. On my way home from work, I absent-mindedly flipped through the day's mail until one particular envelope caught my eye. The address was written in familiar handwriting, and it was like a punch in the stomach. I froze when I remembered my wife's departure. What could I want after so many years? The envelope weighed down my hand as I walked into the house, my mind whirling with unresolved questions and emotions. The next morning, I received some surprising news at work. "Gareth, can I see you in my office?" Jim asked. "We have been very impressed with your dedication and hard work," Jim began. "We'd like to offer you a promotion." Stunned, I nodded, trying to take in the words. Promotion came with greater responsibility and longer working hours, but the extra income promised a better future for my family. He knew that he would soon have to make an important decision. The increased responsibility meant more hours, but it also promised a better future for my family. As I weighed the offer, I thought about the financial freedom it would bring me. However, the cost was the time I would spend away from my children, whom I had dedicated my life to raising. Torn between personal sacrifice and career advancement, I felt the weight of the decision take hold of me. It was a bittersweet opportunity that required careful reflection. On the way home, I thought about the sacrifices I had made for my children. Missed social gatherings, countless sleepless nights, and the relentless pace of solo parenthood had become my norm. I parked the car and saw my wife's letter on the dashboard. Could he manage both a promotion and the emotional storm that was coming from his unexpected arrival? My mind was torn between 2 options, each demanding more than I thought I could give. That afternoon, I sat with my oldest son, who had acted as a second father since his mother left. Today they have offered me a promotion, I began, watching the teenager's eyes widen. It means more money, but also more hours. My oldest daughter smiled faintly, with a mixture of pride and concern. "We'll get by, Dad," they said, the words with a weight that only someone who had matured too quickly would understand. We share a rare moment of recognition and gratitude, with emotions swirling but unexpressed. "Thank you for everything," I said, and my eyes met my eldest daughter's. They nodded their heads, the simple gesture saying it all. However, the idea of the letter gnawed at me. I absent-mindedly touched my pocket, feeling its weight. The room was silent, except for the ticking of the clock. Despite the warmth of the moment, I couldn't shake the haunting memory of my wife's departure. That same night, at last, I decided to open the letter. With trembling hands, I opened it, curiosity and fear mingling in my gut. The familiar handwriting seemed to jump off the page as I began to read. My heart was pounding. After so many years, what could I want now? I scrutinized the first lines. The words blurred momentarily as I tried to assimilate their meaning. He spoke of his desire to be reunited with the family he had left years ago. He wrote about the significant changes he had experienced in his life, making it clear that he wanted another chance. My pulse quickened as I read his request for forgiveness. Memories of our life together surfaced, intermingled with the pain of their sudden departure. The letter ended with a plea for conversation that left me furious and bewildered. Torn between anger and curiosity, I put the letter down on the floor and rubbed my temples. I knew that responding immediately would only lead me to make impulsive decisions. I needed time to process what I was feeling and what this meant for my children. Could I trust his intentions? Questions were crowding my mind, but I consciously decided not to answer yet. My children deserved to be involved in this important decision. I realized that I had to talk to my children about their mother's sudden interest in returning. I glanced at the cards scattered around the table, debating what the best approach would be. Should I tell them everything or leak some details? Walking towards the kitchen, I caught the attention of the eldest, who seemed to sense that something was wrong. "We have to talk," I told him, trying to gather strength for what awaited me. The letter had rekindled old wounds in me. Thoughts I had long since buried resurfaced with great intensity. I remembered the night he left, the confusion and pain in my children's eyes, the guilt I felt for not being enough. Each memory was a sharp needle that poked the surface just as I began to feel whole again. However, he knew he couldn't avoid the situation. My children deserved transparency, as painful as it was. During dinner, I kept the menu to myself. I saw my children laughing and chatting, with an increasingly fragile sense of normalcy. His routine comforted me, but inside it was a tangle of nerves. How would they react to the news? "Dad, you're so quiet tonight," the younger one commented, breaking my train of thought. I forced a smile, hoping to delay the inevitable. For now, I would let you enjoy this moment of peace. In the days that followed, I began to notice subtle changes in my children's behavior. The older ones seemed more distracted, often self-absorbed, while the younger ones began to ask questions about their mother out of the blue. "Dad, do you think Mom ever misses us?" the middle boy asked me one afternoon, catching me off guard. The question hung in the air, adding to my growing anxiety. The time to write the letter was approaching. Even the elderly, normally so focused, seemed distant, almost as if they sensed a change in family dynamics. "Is there anything you're not telling us?" they asked me bluntly, catching me halfway through the sentence. The little ones also began to remember their mother and ask questions that had gone unanswered for too long. I realized that I couldn't delay the conversation any longer. The children needed clarity, and it was up to me to provide it. He could no longer keep the letter a secret. My kids sensed that something wasn't right, and avoiding the conversation only made things worse. I had to address the subject openly and give my children the clarity they deserved. The weight of the letter felt lighter now that he had made up his mind. I had to prepare myself for a conversation that would reopen old wounds, but also open a path. During a weekend family dinner, I finally plucked up the courage to share the contents of the menu with my children. I took a deep breath and gathered them around the table. "Children, there is something important I have to tell you," I began in a firm but emotional voice. As I read the letter aloud, I watched their faces go from confusion to amazement. The room was tense, every word resonating deeply in their hearts. The children's reactions were a mixture of curiosity, anger, and indifference. The older ones clenched their fists, struggling to contain their frustration. Why now, after so many years? The younger ones, however, seemed more curious and asked simple but profound questions. "Do you really want to come back?" one asked quietly. I could see the conflict in their eyes. One part of them wanted answers, while another wanted to push the memory away. I assured them that nothing would happen without their participation. "We'll take it step by step," I said, looking them in the eye. "Your feelings matter, and we will take them into account above all else." The tension in the room eased slightly, although uncertainty persisted. I promised that we would do it together, emphasizing unity. "We are a team," I added. "We face this as a family." My words offered a semblance of comfort in the midst of the emotional storm. As I accumulated more responsibilities at work due to my promotion, balancing my time became increasingly difficult. The mornings started earlier, and the nights got longer. Despite my best efforts, the demands of work began to interfere with my time with family. I kept juggling tasks, and every day I felt thinner. The tension was palpable, both at home and on the job site, as he tried to keep everything in order. Jim, my boss, noticed my distraction and called me for a one-on-one meeting. "Gareth, is everything okay?" he asked, with obvious concern in his voice. I sighed and ran a hand through my hair. "The truth is that a lot has happened at home," admitted. Jim nodded, leaning back in his chair. "You've been doing an amazing job, but I see you're very stressed. Let's talk about what's going on," he suggested. During the talk, I opened up about my family situation. I explained to him the letter from my wife, from whom I had separated, and the emotional burden it had caused me. Jim listened to me attentively, offering his support. "It sounds very harsh," Jim says sympathetically. "If you need flexibility, don't hesitate to ask us. We're here to support you." I felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. Knowing that my boss understood me gave me a renewed perspective to take on my responsibilities. Motivated by Jim's advice, I decided to seek legal advice to understand my options regarding my wife's possible return. I wanted to be prepared to ensure the protection of my family. I made an appointment with an attorney, hoping to clarify custody issues and potential legal ramifications. This step gave me a sense of control in the midst of the chaos, offering a proactive approach to an otherwise unpredictable situation. Meanwhile, my children began researching their mother's life over the past 10 years. Equipped with the internet and an insatiable curiosity, they unearthed surprising details. "Dad, we've found some things about Mom," the eldest told me, showing me his findings. The information presented a complex picture of her mother's life, full of struggles and changes. My heart ached to realize that my children were growing faster than I wanted, taking on burdens they shouldn't. My stress levels skyrocketed as I tried to manage work, home, and legal complexities. Each day felt like a marathon, with little time to catch his breath. I was constantly worried about the well-being of my children, the impact of my wife's sudden interest, and new responsibilities at work. The nights became restless, and my mind was agitated with an endless number of situations. It was a delicate balancing act, and every misstep seemed like a possible fall. I was overwhelmed by the weight of the new promotion and the emotional storm that was brewing at home. The extra responsibilities at work felt like a mountain I had to climb, and each step made it harder to balance my family life. I kept thinking about it, worried as much about my job as about my wife's letter. The burden was immense and left me mentally and physically exhausted. During one particularly hard day, I decided to confide in an old friend, Mark, who had gone through a complicated divorce. We met in a cafeteria, and there I let off steam. "Mark, I don't know how much longer I can take it," I confessed. Mark nodded, understanding the depth of my struggle. "Let's talk about it," Mark offered, his voice firm and reassuring. The conversation helped me to release the contained emotions that I needed so much. Thanks to Mark's perspective, I decided to start attending support group meetings for single-parent families. The first meeting was nerve-wracking, but I quickly found comfort in the experiences we shared. Listening to each other's stories made me feel less alone, and each story reminded me that I wasn't the only one facing those challenges. The room was filled with nodding heads and empathetic smiles, creating a comforting atmosphere in which I felt truly understood. In these support group meetings, I learned various coping strategies and legal advice that I began to put into practice. Practical tips for better time management and navigating legal complexities helped me regain a sense of control. "You're doing great, Gareth," one of the group members encouraged me. With each meeting, I felt more prepared to handle my situation. The new knowledge became my armor and helped me cope with the growing responsibilities. I was overcome by a sense of new strength and determination that pushed me to approach problems more methodically. I started making lists, setting priorities, and seeking professional help when needed. One night I reassured my children, "We have it under control." The advice from the support group was invaluable and helped me find practical solutions. Little by little, I began to feel that I was regaining my balance and was ready to face the challenges with renewed determination. However, peace at home seemed to hang in the balance. The children sensed the undercurrent of tension, which added a layer of stress to their daily lives. I tried to maintain normality, but the atmosphere was undeniably tense. "Is everything okay, Dad?" my oldest daughter asked, worry evident in her eyes. I nodded, forcing a smile. The resolve was fragile, and everyone seemed to walk on eggshells, aware of the uncertainties that lay ahead. One afternoon, my eldest son came up to me with some creepy revelations he had found online about his mother. "Dad, you have to see this," they told me, showing me their research. On the screen appeared social media profiles and newspaper articles, painting a picture that I had not imagined. Seeing her life from a different perspective created a whirlwind of emotions. The children gathered information, and their diligence revealed more than I expected. Her investigations revealed that she had been in another relationship and may be seeking reconciliation for ulterior motives. "Look, Dad, he's had financial problems," my eldest son said. The various messages and mentions indicated a life plagued by instability. I felt my suspicions mount, but I hesitated to draw conclusions without concrete evidence. The new information created even more complexity and left me unsure about the next steps. My suspicions were confirmed to some extent, but without solid evidence, I continued to hesitate to jump to conclusions. "We have to be careful," I warned my children. "Let's not assume the worst yet." There were too many variables, and I didn't want to act impulsively. My children's involvement further complicated things and added weight to every decision. I decided to be prudent and meticulously evaluate each piece of information before acting. To clear their minds, the family decided to take a mini vacation. We head to a cozy cabin by the lake, looking for a break from our everyday stresses. The change of scenery worked wonders, and little by little laughter and joy returned. "This is just what we needed," I said as I relaxed by the campfire. The shared moments of fun and peace helped us regain some semblance of normalcy. The trip allowed the family to reconnect and strengthen our bonds. During our trip, the bond between us was strengthened. Laughter echoed in the woods as we hiked, played, and sat by the campfire. I taught the little ones how to fish, while the older ones shared stories and released accumulated stress. Each moment was like a stitch in the fabric that held us together. For a short time, we were able to forget about worries and enjoy pure and uninterrupted joy as a family. Back home, I began to investigate my wife's life. I reached out to mutual friends to try to reconstruct their activities over the past decade. A few friends were willing to share some information that painted a picture of instability and struggle. It wasn't much, but each piece of information added something to the puzzle. The more I discovered, the more I realized how complex their situation had become, intensifying my need for clarity. Just as the family was getting back into a routine, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated and answered. "Hello?" A familiar voice answered. "Gareth, it's me." My pulse quickened. He wanted to talk about his plans for visiting. The audacity left me momentarily speechless. "I just want to see the kids," she pleaded. The request was left in the air, causing a mixture of irritation and uncertainty about his true intentions. We had a tense conversation in which his words were imbued with both despair and determination. "I just want to see the children again," she said in a hesitant voice. My skepticism was undeniable, my tone cautious. "After all this time, why now?" I asked, frustration running high. He had little to offer in the way of concrete answers, but the insistence in his voice suggested that he would not give up easily. The call ended, leaving more questions than answers. Despite my palpable distrust, I agreed to a meeting under strict conditions. "We will meet in a public place," I insisted, "and if the children don't want to see you, it ends there." He reluctantly agreed, sensing my unwavering determination. The appointment was set, but I couldn't help the uneasiness that ran down my back. What was his real motive? I hoped I wasn't wrong, aware that the children's well-being was at stake. As the encounter approached, the children were visibly anxious. "Do we really have to see it?" the younger one asked, grabbing my hand. They were torn between curiosity and fear. The eldest echoed the question, although with more moderation. "It's been so long, Dad. How do we prepare for this?" I did everything I could to reassure them, but the collective anxiety was hard to ignore. Everyone felt the weight of what was coming. Choose a neutral location to avoid potential conflicts. A local park seemed sensible to me, as it offered a public and family-friendly setting. I notified my wife and reiterated the conditions. "We will meet at 2 p.m. at the duck pond," I confirmed. My heart raced as I thought about the day ahead, but I focused on staying in control. The stage was set, but the emotional background was still turbulent. On the day of the meeting, tension was at its highest. I wondered if I was making the right decision. The meeting was fraught with tension. When my wife approached, her eyes filled with tears at the sight of her older children. The children remained on guard, with an expression of skepticism and confusion. He tried to explain his past decisions to them, but words fell short. "I was going through a lot," she began, but her blank stares said it all. The meeting was awkward, full of tense silences. I watched her intently, keeping my composure despite the emotional storm. His attempts to explain his past decisions came up against walls of skepticism and caution. "I was young and scared," he confessed. But the children's faces remained severe. The eldest, breaking the silence, asked, "What do you expect from us now?" The question seemed to hang in the air, without an answer. The meeting ended without a resolution, leaving me to manage the aftermath. I promised to go deeper, driven by the need to understand deeply. The meeting was awkward and filled with tense silences, punctuated by clumsy attempts at conversation. I kept my composure and watched carefully every reaction. "How did it go for all of you?" he asked, in a voice tinged with uncertainty. The boys looked at each other, unsure of how to respond. "We've managed," I replied, cutting off the tension. I controlled my emotions and focused mostly on the well-being of the children. Afterward, the children expressed their confused emotions, not knowing whether to trust their mother's intentions. "Why now, Dad? Why is he back?" my youngest son asked, his eyes full of uncertainty. I sighed and pulled them closer to me. "I don't have all the answers, but we'll find out together," I assured them. The mixed feelings of anger, sadness, and curiosity were palpable. The conversation cast a heavy shadow over our usually bright home. Looking for closure, I decided to delve deeper into his current life by hiring a private investigator. "We need to know more before making any decision," I explained to my oldest daughter, who nodded her head in understanding. The researcher, a seasoned professional, promised to gather all the details. I gave him an old photograph and the pertinent information. "Find out as much as you can," I asked. This step seemed proactive to me, a necessary measure to protect the future of our family. The following days became a waiting game, full of anxiety and expectation for the researcher's conclusions. Every time the phone rang, my heart skipped a beat. The nights were restless, the waiting relentless. I kept myself busy with work and household responsibilities to distract myself. The children sensed my concern and joined theirs. "Is there any news yet?" the eldest asked daily, with a voice that reflected a mixture of hope and fear. As the weeks went by, I began to receive updates from the researcher. Each report shed more light on my wife's dubious activities. Conversations with mutual acquaintances, the discovery of his social media posts, all painted a bleak picture. "He has had economic and legal problems," said the researcher. I sat quietly, taking in the information. The results relieved and saddened me at the same time, as they confirmed my fears about his ulterior motives. The evidence pointed to financial difficulties and legal problems from which he was trying to escape by reconnecting with the family. I sat with the reports, feeling a mixture of vindication and grief. "She's up to her ears in debt and even faces some lawsuits," the researcher reported. The selfishness of his motives hurt me more than I had anticipated. He was not looking for a future with us, but to escape his own past mistakes. I felt vindicated, but deeply saddened by the selfish motives of his return. The updates confirmed what I feared. I was using our family as a lifeline. "I knew it," I murmured, my eyes full of despair. Although the truth brought clarity, it also reopened old wounds. Deep down, he hoped for a true reconciliation. Instead, I faced the reality of their selfish intentions. I shared the results with my children, and we had a heart-to-heart talk about confidence and making tough decisions. "I need you all to understand what is really happening," I began, exposing the researcher's reports. His eyes widened as he read the documents, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We'll handle it together," I assured them. The conversation was full of sincerity and vulnerability, which brought us all together. The family agreed to move forward without their mother, feeling unity in our decision. "We can do it, as we have always done," I said, my voice full of determination. The children nodded, assuming the reality of their mother's actions. The mutual decision to protect our bond strengthened our resolve. Together we made a pact to support each other, and our unity became stronger than ever. I began to take steps to legally protect our family from any possible manipulation. I consulted with the attorney again and laid out a plan to ensure our financial and emotional well-being. "We have to cover all the bases," I explained, and signed the documents that would safeguard our future. The legal measures provided a layer of security that put me at ease. For the first time in weeks, I felt control coming back into our lives. At last came the great revelation. I gathered my kids around the dining room table. I took a deep breath before unfolding the documents I had been quietly working on for years. "I have something important to teach you," I began. My children looked at me curiously as I slowly handed them the papers, their eyes widening wider. What these documents contained was a testament to my love and dedication. For the past 10 years, I had been quietly saving and investing money to ensure a better future for my children. I explained it to him, detailing the sacrifices I made and the financial strategies I adopted. "I wanted to make sure that you could all go to university, have a stable life," I told them, my voice full of emotion. The children's faces softened as they realized the extent of my commitment. I finished officially adopting them, making sure they were legally protected against any kind of custody claim their mother might make. "I wanted to make sure you were always with me, no matter what," I said, looking them in the eye. The weight of my words settled into the room and instilled in them a sense of security that they had never experienced before. The legal documents symbolized a new and unbreakable bond. The children were stunned and deeply moved, their eyes filled with tears. They had always known that I loved them, but seeing the depth of my planning and my effort was overwhelming. "Dad, have you done all this for us?" the youngest asked incredulously. I nodded my head, and my eyes filled with tears too. They realized that they finally understood the depth of my love and dedication. It was a moment none of us would forget. As we hugged, I felt a wave of relief. The years of hard work, sleepless nights, and incessant worry had been worth it. I took a deep breath and felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. "We're going to be okay," I whispered, hugging them. The room was filled with love and a newfound sense of security. At that moment, I knew we could face the future without fear. Together, we were stronger and more united than ever. The legal and financial safeguards I had established strengthened our bond, giving us a sense of stability and security. "We are a team, and we will always have each other," I reminded them. The children nodded, their hearts full of confidence. For the first time in a long time, we felt like everything was going to be okay. The future seemed brighter. In the weeks that followed, we found a new sense of balance and peace. The emotional storm had calmed, replaced by a calm resilience. We returned to our routines with renewed energy, knowing that we supported each other. "It's nice to have a little normality," the oldest commented, and I couldn't agree more. Our home felt lighter, free from the constant shadow of worry or unexpected interruptions. We began to focus on our goals and dreams, no longer overshadowed by his mother's return. "Dad, I want to join the soccer team," my middle son announced one afternoon. "Go for it," I encouraged him, enjoying his renewed enthusiasm. The children threw themselves into school, hobbies, and future plans. It was a change that indicated healing, a focus on growing and thriving rather than simply surviving. Life was promising again. I was proud to see my children grow into strong, independent people. Each of them demonstrated remarkable resilience, channeling their energy into positive outlets. The eldest excelled in his studies, while the little ones had fun with sports and the arts. "You are doing wonderful things," he often reminded them, his heart swelling with pride. Watching them flourish was my greatest reward, a testament to our collective strength and our unity as a family. We move forward with resistance and hope, ready to face together what the future holds for us. My preparations had ensured our stability, but our collective spirit was what really kept us strong. "We're prepared for anything, Dad," my youngest son said confidently, and I smiled, feeling the same. United by love, trust, and a shared journey, we face the future with optimism. The past was still a chapter, but our story was far from over.